As we look into the future, the words of Michael Porter must ring loud in the ears of tomorrow's CEO. I quote, "In many companies, leadership has degenerated into orchestrating operational improvements and doing deals. But the leader's role is broader and far more important. General management is more than the stewardship of individual functions. Its core is strategy, defining and communicating the company's unique position, making trade-offs, and forging fit among activities. The third of the forces will be the requirement for tomorrow's CEO to be equally entrepreneurial and professional. There was a time when senior business leaders could call themselves entrepreneurs or professional business managers. Tomorrow's CEO will have to be both to succeed. Without entrepreneurial flair, you will miss the opportunity and misprice the risk. And unless you possess professional management skills, you will not be able to leverage your time and energy or exercise adequate control over the assets and resources under your stewardship. The CEO of the future will require at least 3 important entrepreneurial attributes: optimism, single-mindedness, and creativity. All of us here today have devoted and continue to devote a significant portion of our lives to acquiring the education and skills we need to function as business leaders. We have tapped into the vast body of functional business knowledge, we have studied the theory, and we have implemented it as we discover when to manage and when to lead. Without these professional skills, entrepreneurial vision will not find traction. The pursuit of opportunity beyond the resources controlled will remain simply a pursuit, or crystallize only into a venture far more limited in size and scope than it could otherwise be. The MBA and its particular integrative approach to the various functions of business provides a valuable counterbalance to the many idiosyncrasies of entrepreneurial zeal. When we leave here with our MBA hammer, every problem looks like a nail. But with time, the theories, frameworks, and processes become an invaluable part of our leadership arsenal. As an aside, the notion that the MBA contributed to the current global financial crisis is as stupid as blaming the gun for the murder. Neil Ferguson used a more refined turn of phrase. Financial markets, I'm quoting, financial markets are like the mirror of mankind, revealing every hour of every working day the way we value ourselves and the resources of the world around us. It is not the fault of the mirror if it reflects our blemishes as clearly as our beauty. The fourth of the forces will be the requirement for tomorrow's CEO to place ethics above governance. There is an old saying that a tree dies from the top. Clearly, good governance starts with the leadership of a company. With the greatest respect to all those who have a different view, the composition, structure, and formal processes of the board, the CEO, and the executive management of a company are lesser determinants of good governance than their ethics. For many years, I have experienced the frustration around the nexus between entrepreneurship and corporate governance. As we allow ourselves to be subjugated to the agenda of others, 2 things happen. Firstly, we lose our authenticity, and secondly, we start to take shortcuts that invariably compromise our ethics. The third pressure is success itself, which breeds overconfidence, arrogance, denial of the role of others in the success, and a desire to sustain or increase the success unrealistically, and most seriously, seduction by power. Abraham Lincoln once said, "Nearly all men can stand adversity, but if you want to test a man's character, give him power." The fine line between the use and abuse of power is dictated only by our ethics. The final and most debilitating pressure is greed. When we start to see our net worth as the only measure of our progress, we embark on a downward ethical spiral that knows no end. Our guide is no longer a set of principles or values, it is the law and how to circumvent it. We move from doing what is right and proper to doing anything as long as we're not caught. In his remarkable commentary on the new economy entitled The Corrosion of Character, Richard Sennett writes, I quote, "Short-term capitalism threatens to corrode character, particularly those qualities of character which bind human beings to one another and furnish each with a sense of sustainable self." Tomorrow's CEO will lead organizations where a high ethical culture dominates. She will reinforce that culture not through box-ticking governance or through sitting around campfires holding hands singing Kumbaya, but through an ethical culture determined by the 3 most powerful instruments of organizational design: who we hire, who we fire, and who we promote. You do not need me to summarize the history and pain of the past, But the insidious and systematic degradation of our people has presented South African business leaders with 4 unique additional challenges that demand a leadership response beyond those of our international counterparts. The first of these, and the one that I will only mention in passing given the time available, is the challenge of upholding ethics in a rapidly changing society. Regrettably, for most of our people, much of the past was so bad that any good it might have contained is also being rejected. How do we propagate Eurocentric ethics when the majority of our population were the victims of Eurocentric colonialism, Eurocentric apartheid, and Eurocentric capitalism? The second challenge is the socio-economic divide. For many years, commentators have referred to South Africa's 2 economies. While some of us live middle and upper income lives, there are 13.5 million people who receive government grants of one sort or another. These people are not consumers, they are survivors. In a recent column, Ron Rollerheiser says, quote, "The real danger of wealth is that it causes a blindness that renders us incapable of seeing the poor," end quote. As leaders of South African companies, we must see the poor. We must acknowledge that even at substantially higher growth rates, unfitted capitalism and a market orientation on the part of the first economy are not going to alleviate the poverty trap of the second economy, which comprises simply too many people without the skills or the intellectual or financial capital to leverage themselves into the first economy. Many of them are unemployed and many are unemployable. But what part must business play in addressing this divide or in support of government initiatives? Of course, our prime obligation is to run good, sustainable companies which provide customers with value, suppliers with a route to market, society with responsible behavior, the government with tax, and shareholders with returns. But in this country, with our history and situation, with the legacy we have inherited, we have a greater than normal obligation to create permanent jobs and to provide employees with the skills, training, and career paths that enhance their productivity, their earning power, their employability, and the quality of their lives and those of their dependents. In this country, with our history and situation, with the legacy that we have inherited, we have a greater than normal obligation to facilitate the participation of our employees in the ownership of our companies with all the associated shareholder rights, the right to dividends, the right to vote, and the right to realize wealth through capital gains. In our country, with our history and situation, with the legacy we have inherited, we have a greater than normal obligation to demonstrate corporate social responsibility, and we have a greater than normal obligation to engage with the government in support of those initiatives that might redress the situation. Our third challenge is the transformation imperative. As business leaders, what do we really understand transformation to be? Is it grudging compliance in order to qualify for government business? Is it the numbers game to ensure that we achieve equity targets? Or do we embrace transformation because we recognize that properly harnessed, our South African diversity can be our greatest competitive weapon in a multicultural global economy? In my view, transformation is much less about measurement and much more about how the people in our organizations think about themselves and each other. It is about how we get them to rise above the noise of politics, the petty racism, and the growing pains of our democracy, to recognize that our societal and cultural differences are our strength, and that those of us who have benefited from the past have an obligation to share with those who have been prejudiced by it. As business leaders, we can and must accelerate the rate of change, and I have to say that if you are doing it only to comply with the law, you are misguided. Transformation starts with a conviction, firstly, that there is an obligation to redress the past, and secondly, a belief that without it, our country and companies will fail. Tomorrow's CEO will require intellect, judgment, and resilience to succeed. Knowing that she is under scrutiny 24/365, she will need to show that application, diligence, innovation, humility, and just plain hard work over long periods of time will succeed long after the dishonest short-term opportunist has been forgotten. It will not be easy, but the rewards are unparalleled. The satisfaction of enabling the growth of people and assets by serving society is a privilege granted to only a few. The associated discovery of self represents a most extraordinary journey to our essence. Finally, the scarcity of the skills necessary to be a successful CEO will ensure that the material rewards and the quality of life will always rank high. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the world the CEO of tomorrow will face. I wish you every success in shaping it Thank you.